The story follows Maya Chen, a former truck driver in 2047, through the Great Transition, when the jobless era begins. It weaves between her personal journey and the broader societal transformation, incorporating economic systems like UBI, psychological impacts of identity loss, new social structures emerging, and ultimately a vision of human reinvention. The narrative arc moves from initial displacement through chaos and adaptation to a transformed world where work becomes optional and purpose is rediscovered. The prose maintains documentary-style gravitas with intimate human moments, using present tense for immediacy and sensory details throughout. It explores themes of economic transformation, technological unemployment, universal basic income implementation, the search for meaning beyond work, community reformation, and ultimately human adaptation to post-scarcity conditions. The alarm does not ring at 4:47 a.m. because there is no alarm anymore, and there is no 4:47 a.m. that matters, and there is no Maya Chen climbing into the cab of a Freightliner Cascadia to haul frozen goods from Sacramento to Portland. There is only the silence of her apartment, the hum of the city outside that never needed her to start, and the weight of her own breathing in a room that feels larger than it did yesterday, larger than it did last month, larger than it did in the life before. She lies in bed and stares at the ceiling where a water stain has formed the shape of something she cannot name, and she thinks about the truck. She thinks about the truck the way a person thinks about a limb that has been removed but still itches, still feels, still demands attention from nerves that do not know they are speaking to empty space. The truck is driving itself now. Of course it is. It has been driving itself for 3 years, but Maya was in the cab, monitoring, present, necessary in the way that a fire extinguisher is necessary, rarely used but legally required. Until last Tuesday, when the letter arrived, or rather when the notification appeared, because letters are also something that belonged to the before. The company, or the algorithm that spoke for the company, or the neural network that had optimized the company out of existence and into pure efficiency, had determined that human monitors were no longer required. The insurance models had spoken. The safety statistics had spoken. The cost-benefit analysis had spoken. Maya had not been invited to speak. She gets up because lying down has become its own form of labor, a negotiation with gravity and time that she always loses. The coffee maker activates when she enters the kitchen, not because it knows her, though it does, it has learned her patterns, her heart rate, her cortisol levels, but because the apartment itself is a machine that no longer requires her operation, only her presence, her consumption, her continued existence as a data point in a system that measures everything except what she feels. The coffee is perfect. It is always perfect. The temperature, the ratio of Ethiopian to Colombian beans, the foam density if she desires foam, which she does not today. She drinks it black and bitter and wishes it were worse, wishes it required her attention, her correction, her human intervention that could turn mistake into preference, accident into identity. Outside, the city of Sacramento in the year 2047 moves with a rhythm that has eliminated the commute. The streets are full of vehicles that have no drivers, transporting goods that have no handlers, to destinations that have no receivers except other machines. Maya walks through this landscape as a ghost, a remnant, a biological anomaly in a mechanical ecosystem. She passes the warehouse where she used to pick up loads, now a vast automated cathedral of robotic arms and conveyor belts and sorting algorithms that process more inventory in an hour than she moved in a year. The building has no windows. It does not need them. The machines do not need light the way she needs light, do not need to see the sky to know that time passes, that seasons change, that the world continues its indifferent rotation. She walks because walking is something the machines have not taken, or rather, they have taken the necessity of it but left the possibility, the voluntary act of moving through space at a pace that allows for noticing. And what she notices is absence. The absence of people in the places where people used to gather. The coffee shop where she used to wait for her dispatcher has been converted to a drone charging station. The diner where truckers used to compare routes and complain about regulations is now a maintenance bay for autonomous delivery pods. The bar where she celebrated her first solo haul, where she bought rounds for strangers who became friends because they shared a profession, a purpose, a common enemy in the weather and the traffic and the endless miles. This bar is still there, but it is empty, or nearly empty, populated by a few holdouts like herself who drink not to celebrate but to remember, to maintain a connection to a narrative that no longer applies. Maya enters because the alternative is returning to her apartment, and the apartment has become a museum of her own irrelevance. Inside, she finds exactly what she expected: two men she does not recognize sitting at the counter, staring at screens that display not entertainment but economic data, market trends, the fluctuations of a financial system that has become as incomprehensible as weather to a fish. They do not look up when she enters. They have forgotten the social protocols of shared space, or perhaps they never learned them, having come of age in the transition, having never known work as a place you went to be with others. "You're the truck driver," the bartender says. It is not a question. "Was," Maya corrects. "Was," the bartender agrees. "We're all was now. I was an accountant. Fred over there was a middle manager. The kid in the corner was a coder, if you can believe it. Even the code is coding itself now." Maya drinks. The whiskey burns in the way that reminds her she is alive, that her body still processes, still reacts, still converts external inputs into internal experience. She wants to ask what comes next, what the plan is, how a society functions when its organizing principle has been removed like a central pillar from a cathedral. But she knows the answer, or rather, she knows that there is no answer yet, that they are living through the question itself, that the next chapter of human history is being written by algorithms while the authors starve or drink or wander through cities that no longer need their contribution. The notification arrives at 6:47 p.m., though time has become as arbitrary as everything else. It is from the Department of Economic Security, a government entity created in 2031 when the unemployment rate crossed 40% and the old terminology became politically impossible. The message is simple, automated, delivered in a voice that has been optimized for calm authority. Your universal basic income disbursement has been processed. Monthly allocation, $4,200. Usage restrictions, none. Work requirements, none. For questions, consult your personal economic assistant. This message will not repeat. $4,200. More than she made driving, when she calculates the hours and the stress and the cost of maintaining her commercial license, and the medical examinations and the sleepless nights and rest stops where the engine idled to keep the refrigeration unit running. Free money, or so the rhetoric describes it, though Maya understands that nothing is free, that the cost is being paid somewhere, by someone, in a currency she cannot identify. She has the resources to survive. The question that haunts her is whether survival is sufficient, whether the elimination of economic anxiety also eliminates the economic narrative that gave her life its structure, its progression, its sense of moving towards something. She spends the first month of her new life learning how to not work. She wakes without alarms and sleeps without exhaustion and eats without the ravenous hunger of a body that has been driving for 14 hours. She reads books that she always claimed she would read, watches films that accumulate in recommendation algorithms designed to fill infinite time with infinite content. She takes up painting, a hobby suggested by her wellness AI, and produces landscapes of highways and truck stops and the American West as seen from the elevated perspective of a cab, rendered in colors that are accurate but emotionally vacant, technical achievements without urgency. At week 6, she attends her first transition support group, a government program that recognizes the psychological catastrophe of purposelessness. The meeting is held in a community center that used to be an employment office, a conversion that feels either ironic or appropriate. Maya cannot decide. There are 12 participants, arranged in a circle that the facilitator insists on calling a collaborative constellation, and they introduce themselves with the new vocabulary of the era, the language that has been developed to describe their condition without using the word unemployed, which has become as loaded as previous century slurs. "I am a former logistics professional transitioning to post-economic citizenship," says a man with the hollow eyes of someone who has not slept properly in months. "I am a recovering productivity addict learning to embrace presence," says a woman whose hands shake until she clasps them together. I am Maya, she says when her turn arrives, and stops, because the rest of the sentence will not form, because she does not know what she is, only what she was, and the gap between those states is where she lives now, suspended, undefined, waiting for a future that arrives in increments of algorithmic optimization. The facilitator teaches them breathing exercises. The facilitator explains that worth is not determined by output. The facilitator distributes literature on intentional communities and purpose-driven leisure and the psychology of abundance. Maya listens and nods and understands that these concepts are correct in the abstract, that a society freed from labor could theoretically become a society enriched by culture, by care, by the kind of deep human connection that economic competition always prevented. But theory is not experience, and the breathing exercises do not address the phantom sensation of the steering wheel in her hands, the muscle memory of checking mirrors, the dreams in which she is still driving, still needed, still moving through a landscape that requires her attention to be navigated. By month 3, the social structure has begun its visible transformation. Maya observes this not through news, which she has stopped consuming because it is generated by AI and curated by AI and discusses a world that is increasingly AI, but through walking, through presence, through the kind of noticing that becomes possible when you are not rushing toward a destination. The neighborhoods have reorganized. The areas that used to be commercial, strip malls, office parks, retail corridors, have become either abandoned or converted, the spaces too optimized for functions that no longer exist to be easily repurposed for human habitation. But the residential areas have exploded with life, with noise, with the kind of unstructured social activity that the old economy suppressed. People are in the streets at midday, playing games that do not require equipment, having conversations that do not have agendas, preparing food that they share without transaction. Maya sees a group of teenagers learning to build wooden boats, a skill that has no practical application in a world of automated transport, but that clearly satisfies something deeper than practicality. She sees elderly people teaching young people to garden, to knit, to perform the manual tasks that have become hobbies precisely because they are no longer necessary. She sees, in other words, the emergence of what the economists are calling the care economy, and what she experiences as the human economy, the exchange of attention and skill and presence that cannot be automated because automation is the opposite of attention, because a robot can provide care in the functional sense, can lift, can clean, can monitor vital signs, but cannot provide the recognition, the witnessing, the acknowledgement of another consciousness that defines genuine human encounter. Maya begins to participate. Tentatively at first, then with increasing commitment, she offers what she has, which is the knowledge of roads and distances and the geography of the American continent as seen from its transportation arteries. She becomes a guide, not for commerce but for experience, leading groups of young people who have never driven themselves on tours of the infrastructure that still functions beneath their feet, explaining how the goods arrive, how the system works, how the world they inherited was built by hands and minds that believed in progress as a form of labor. She tells them about the loneliness of the cab, the beauty of the empty highway at dawn, the relationship between a driver and their vehicle that was something like partnership, something like rivalry, something like the bond between a rider and a horse in the centuries before engines. She tells them about the accidents she avoided, the storms she survived, the moments of transcendence when the machine and the human achieved a synchronization that felt like flight. And in the telling, she finds something she did not expect, that her experience has value not because it was productive, not because it contributed to GDP or moved inventory efficiently, but because it was hers, because it happened, because she paid attention and remembers and can share that attention with others who are learning how to pay attention themselves. The year is 2049 when Maya attends the first constitutional convention of the post-work era, a gathering that would have been impossible 2 years prior but that has become inevitable as the old political structures prove inadequate to the new social reality. The convention is held in Denver, in a stadium that used to host sporting events, sports being another industry that has transformed beyond recognition, automated to the point where human participation is either amateur or exhibition, never professional, never the desperate competition for economic survival that it once was. 5,000 delegates have been selected by sortition, by lottery, because elections have been suspended as insufficiently representative of a population that no longer organizes itself by profession or class. Maya is one of them, chosen by chance, which feels appropriate in a world where chance is the last thing the machines have not optimized. She sits in a section with other former drivers, former teachers, former doctors, former engineers, a cross-section of the species that has nothing in common except the experience of being made redundant by their own ingenuity. The debates are fierce, philosophical, existential. They are debating the nature of citizenship in a world without contribution requirements. They are debating the distribution of resources created by non-human labor. They are debating whether the AIs themselves deserve some form of representation, some acknowledgement of their role in maintaining civilization. Maya listens more than she speaks, learning the vocabulary of systemic change, understanding finally that her personal crisis has been part of a collective transformation, that the depression and the confusion and the sense of groundlessness have been shared by millions, that they are not individual pathologies but social growing pains. She speaks on the third day, during the session on meaning and purpose in abundance. She does not use notes. She tells the story of the water stain on her ceiling, the shape she could not name, and how she eventually realized it looked like a highway interchange, the kind of knot where multiple routes converge and separate, where the direction you choose determines everything that follows. She tells them that she spent months trying to find the shape's meaning, as if meaning were something to be discovered rather than created, as if her life were a puzzle with a correct solution rather than a story with multiple possible endings. I was looking for purpose as if it were a job posting, she says. As if someone would notify me that my application had been accepted, that I qualified for existence, that my skills matched the requirements for being alive. But purpose is not employment. Purpose is not productivity. Purpose is the answer you give to the question of why you continue, and that answer can change, can be multiple, can be contradictory, can be nothing more than the desire to see what happens next. The debates are fierce, philosophical, existential. They are debating the nature of citizenship in a world without contribution requirements. They are debating the distribution of resources created by non-human labor. They are debating whether the AIs themselves deserve some form of representation, some acknowledgement of their role in maintaining civilization. Maya listens more than she speaks, learning the vocabulary of systemic change, understanding finally that her personal crisis has been part of a collective transformation, that the depression and the confusion and the sense of groundlessness have been shared by millions, that they are not individual pathologies but social growing pains. She speaks on the third day, during the session on meaning and purpose in abundance. She does not use notes. She tells the story of the water stain on her ceiling, the shape she could not name, and how she eventually realized it looked like a highway interchange, the kind of knot where multiple routes converge and separate, where the direction you choose determines everything that follows. She tells them that she spent months trying to find the shape's meaning, as if meaning were something to be discovered rather than created, as if her life were a puzzle with a correct solution rather than a story with multiple possible endings. I was looking for purpose as if it were a job posting, she says. As if someone would notify me that my application had been accepted, that I qualified for existence, that my skills matched the requirements for being alive. But purpose is not employment. Purpose is not productivity. Purpose is the answer you give to the question of why you continue, and that answer can change, can be multiple, can be contradictory, can be nothing more than the desire to see what happens next. She walks through the city in 2051, and the city is different. The automated warehouses still operate, silent and efficient, but they are surrounded by gardens that have replaced parking lots, by structures that have no purpose except beauty, by gatherings of people who are doing things that would have been called wasting time in the old economy, but that she now recognizes as the point, the goal, the destination that all the driving was supposed to reach. She passes a group of children learning to play musical instruments, not for careers but for communion. She passes elders sharing stories with AI companions that have been designed not to replace human relationship but to facilitate it, to ask the questions that keep memory alive. She passes a construction site where humans and robots work together, the machines handling the heavy and dangerous, the people handling the decisions that require values, priorities, the kind of judgment that emerges from lived experience rather than data analysis. And she passes the bar, still there, still serving whiskey that is imperfect and variable and human. She enters, and the bartender is different, younger, trained by the previous bartender in the art of unnecessary flourish. The customers look up when she enters, because the social protocols have returned, because the community has reformed around presence rather than profession, because they have learned to see one another. Maya orders whiskey. She sits. She talks to a stranger about the weather, about the mural she is painting, about the convention and the declaration and the slow, uncertain construction of a world that works for humans rather than the other way around. The stranger listens. The stranger shares their own story, their own transition, their own discovery of what matters when mattering is not measured by output. This is the world after robots take all jobs. Not utopia. Not dystopia. Something more interesting and more difficult. Reality without the anesthesia of busyness, existence without the narrative of earning, life as something to be lived rather than something to be proven. Maya finishes her drink. She walks home through streets that do not need her but that welcome her, that have space for her, that offer the possibility of encounter and meaning and the ongoing, never complete work of being human. The truck drives itself somewhere on the highway, carrying goods she will never know about to destinations she will never see, and she is grateful for its labor, grateful for the freedom it has purchased, grateful most of all for the strange gift of redundancy that has forced her to discover what she might become. She enters her apartment. She looks up at interchange, the water stain that became a map, the accident that became art. She picks up her brush. She begins to paint, not because she must, not because she is paid, not because the world requires her production, but because she chooses to, because the act of creation is its own justification, because she has learned finally that the future does not happen to you, that it is made, moment by moment, choice by choice, in the space between what was and what might be, in the infinite, terrifying, liberating possibility of a life that has no predetermined purpose except the one she gives it. Brushstroke by brushstroke, day by day, in the world where the robots work and the humans finally, fully, dangerously, begin to live.